I'll start at 2:15 here. Hello, Ben. Can you guys hear me okay? It's always a little messy when I have voice meter going. Yeah, voice meter is pretty nice. It sounds way different with a microphone with on and off, so. All right, so I'll go ahead and get going. I want to preface this with, it's a little bit hard to create a presentation to coach League of Legends because it's not the simplest game. There's a lot of complexities. So based on it being two different audiences of people that maybe have never even seen a game of League of Legends and then more experienced people, just know that I kind of try to do 20 minutes of both. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and get going. Basically, I'm TJ. I have professional experience. I coach at Illinois Wesleyan right now. I was a player. I played Phil in all 5 roles, which is just meaning that I could play any of the positions, and then that was at a challenger level. So I have quite the experience, and it's really interesting being a coach at Illinois Wesleyan because I am essentially the target audience for students based on just graduating. So it's a very interesting dynamic. So what is League of Legends? To me, League of Legends is a MOBA. I mean, that's what it is by definition. And that basically just means it's a multiplayer online battle arena. I like to compare League of Legends to chess, but we'll get a little bit more into that later. Every person selects a character. There's no character progression. It all resets the start of every game. There's over 150 characters to choose from. The enemy team will be doing the same thing, and then you guys will go against each other to try to destroy each other's bases. And in League of Legends, the final thing in the base is called the Nexus, and once you destroy the Nexus, you win. So that's pretty easy, or at least you would think it would be, except there's a lot of complexity, and I want to get some of the baseline information out for anyone that might not know any of it. Basically, every character has 4 abilities. There's 3 basic ones, then an ultimate one, which is essentially just a really strong one. And then everyone can choose 2 different summoner spells. There are 10 in total, and everyone has access to them. And those just either minimize weaknesses or maximize strengths. Before that, you do the same thing with runes. Again, there's a bunch of different runes, and that'll just make your character stronger in certain regards, which can either, again, address some of the weaknesses or increase the strengths. The very baseline of the game is that you kill minions, you kill structures, jungle camps, neutral objectives, whatever it may be, and you earn money, and you buy items with that money to get stronger, to then make it easier to do those things again. So we have 3 different lanes in a jungle, and in the bottom lane, there are 2 people. So you can see down here, let me open up Epic Pen. You would have 1 person, 2 person, someone in mid lane, and someone in top lane, and then a jungler who is the X factor in the game. Top lane tends to be a bunch of fighters or tanks who will go up against each other pretty isolated because there's not much up here. Mid lane tends to be carry champions or champions that are able to go around the map and impact the other lanes. And then the bottom laners are a carry and a support. So the carry is really weak in the early game, so they get paired with support in order to be able to get them out and then let them get stronger. And when you pair it like this, you would think, okay, well, if this champion is champion X and this champion is Y, then these will always interact in the same way. So if X beats Y, then this lane will always be winning. But that's where the jungler comes in. The jungler, you can choose to influence what lane you want to influence based on what you're clearing, how you're approaching the game, your general strategy, all of that. And then that will change some of these matchups. So instead of it being X is greater than Y always, it's X is greater than Y at certain points of the game, or maybe Y is greater than X in this game because of how the jungler has chosen to tag team that person. You can kind of compare this to like man marking and in basketball or something like that, where the jungler might try to shut down the weakest player, or maybe he acts as additional support for his best player. In the jungle, there are jungle camps. There are 2 buffs, which make your character stronger, and then a bunch of minor camps, which are the circles, and those will just give you money and experience. The buffs actually are pretty significant increases to power, so they either make you have lower cooldowns with your spells or make your auto attacks slow and do more damage. And auto attacks are basically the simplest form to hit the enemy. So as you can see on this screen, we have all of those items that I just mentioned, and the map is almost symmetrical. There's a couple of differences, but the jungle camps you'll see are like this, and those are the same there. So everybody has access to the same amount of things. The only thing not on this is that there's what's called a scuttle crab in the middle, and that just gives a bunch of extra money and experience, and that's something that the teams might fight over. So on this slide, we can see the neutral objectives in the game, again, minus scuttle crab. So we have 4 dragons, and the way this works is basically dragon 1 will spawn, and it is one of these 4. Sorry, not the middle one. And these each give you different stats if you kill them as a team. And then what happens if you kill that one can no longer spawn again. So let's say the next one was this one. Okay, great, you kill that one. And then from there, it'll be one of these 2. And then that's the only type of dragon that'll spawn for the rest of the game. Once you kill 4 dragons in total, you get a really, really big buff. After that, this elder dragon will spawn, and this basically guarantees winning team fights because it just adds a ton of combat stats. Both the dragon soul, which is from killing 4 dragons, and the elder dragon. In addition, we have Rift Herald here. And Rift Herald essentially lets you take 1 turret. It just does a bunch of damage to it, so it basically guarantees that it dies. And then Baron right here will empower your minions, make them stronger, so you can kill turrets or structures easier. It also gives you a lot of gold, so it's a big power play, kind of like a hockey power play where someone's out of bounds or they got fouled out and so they can't play anymore, or something like that, where you are in the driver's seat of the game when you get it. So the general flow of the game is basically that you're trying to earn money to buy items. And so you're doing a bunch of actions in order to get that done. So here we'll start with minions, and maybe you push your minions, which means kill more minions than the enemy, which means you get a space advantage, which will let you either A, hit the turret, B, kill a dragon, maybe go to Rift Herald, or go impact another lane, etc. From there, once all that's done, you'll hit inhibitors, which will make your minions stronger right here. And then usually you'll kill a Baron and then end the game by hitting the Nexus. That's a general flow, very, very, very simplified. But if you look for this pattern in pro play, if you've never seen anything, then this is generally what you'll see. So there's a lot of elements to League of Legends, and these are just some of the major ones. I didn't even go over some of the minor ones. I like to compare it to live action chess. So you have to both know what to do, how to do it, where to be, when to do those things. And you also have to execute on that. So kind of like shooter games, you have to be able to click in the right places at the right times, hit your abilities, all that kind of stuff. So it's really important that this is recognized as something that's really hard to do. You can boil it down to some simplicities, kind of like I did here, but the players have to learn a lot of information, and it's really important to recognize that it's not just like playing video games. You're actually learning a bunch of really key skills doing this. So you start every game with what's called champion select. And so here I've numbered all of this. So you have, essentially you'll start with 3 bans down here in the corner. And this is a screenshot from the LCS, which is the Pro League. And these will be alternating. So ban 1, ban 2, ban 3, ban 4. Etc. And then it'll be a snake draft after that. So team A will pick 1 champion, then team 2 will pick 2 champions, and then you follow on the order on screen. And the reason why this is important is because this gives blue side, the left side, or the bottom side in the game, access to the strongest champion, but these guys have some unique counter pick scenarios where they get the last pick. So they can pick a character that's especially good into the enemy composition, and they also get 2 power picks here. They're also the first ones to ban and the first to pick before and after ban. So both sides have their strengths and weaknesses. So if you're coaching and you need to select a side, you should consider what thing might your team value the most. So moving on from that, but still in the realm of draft, there are essentially 4 different types of characters. Again, you can break these down into a lot of different subclasses. But the 4 different types are fighters, who usually are like melee. They might have some engage and they do a decent amount of damage. They live for a long time. We have tanks who have a lot of crowd control. So stuff like stuns, slows, they can zone off enemies. They don't really do too much damage and they're really strong early game. We have carries who tend to be weaker in the early game. Not the example on screen, but most carries are. And then they'll get stronger as the game progresses through all the golden items that I mentioned earlier. And then we have assassins who can basically kill those carries. So their job is that they're strong early in mid game, and then they'll try to snowball a lead and then kill the carry later on, or maybe prevent them from doing damage and essentially killing them because they're not impacting the fight. So again, with draft, we have basically 4 main types of compositions. Again, you can break these down into a bunch of different subcategories, but we have poke champions, and their job would be to whittle down their opponents before being able to fight. And that would beat disengaged compositions. And that's because disengaged can't really engage. And so the champions with poke, who are generally squishy, long range, etc., can't really be hit. We have split push compositions whose job is, let's say, to distract people on one side and then go take objectives or turrets on the other side. And those would again beat disengaged compositions because while that person is off doing their own thing, usually the top laner, the enemy team can't really do anything. We have engaged compositions which beat both poke and split push because poke, they're not going to win if they don't hit you, and split push is a 4 versus 5. So engage would win in those cases. And then we have disengage, which would beat that engage because they want the engaged composition to go into them. So again, that's just some of the basics of League of Legends. Not even, we haven't even looked at a screenshot or anything really of the game, and there's already so much to talk about. So with that in mind, you should really, if you're new to this game, watch some pro play, ask questions, see what's going on, and then start to tailor what your coaching looks like based on what skills you're able to either A, have right now, or B, develop through watching. What I mean by that is, let's say you have no game knowledge. That doesn't mean that you can't still be an effective coach. You can still help them with communication. You can still help them with understanding how to work together. You can help them, let's say, by just being a decision maker. For example, player A is better than player B. So maybe you guys say, no, we're going to put more resources into player A than player B. Really kind of just being that mentor figure and there is something that is still valuable. So don't feel like you have to sit down and play 1,000 games or watch for 2,000 hours to be able to learn stuff that can impact the students. So continuing off that idea, there's only 2 points on the slide because I view that these are pretty much the most important. And you need to create an environment where students are able to grow, learn, ask questions, all of that, pretty natural as educators. So this one should be a priority. And then ask questions. Again, you can supplement your lack of information about the game by getting them to do the heavy lifting on game knowledge, but you're the one facilitating, directing the conversation. Then if we want to get a little bit more specific, recognize that coaching is not just out of a textbook. You have to deal with different personalities. You have to figure out how to get people to work together, all that kind of stuff. So know that it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. You can coach with good game knowledge. So that, again, requires a little more time investment. So if you want to go down that route, that's fine. We'd love to chat about that later. You need to be able to have logical and critical thinking. So, for example, we should be doing X because of Y. Not just we should do X because best pro player says do X. Again, if you're low on that game knowledge, then that might be a good thing to do still because then it's just copy pasting. But if you start to develop that game knowledge, then you need to start having good rationale behind it, especially because kids won't have to buy in if you don't. You need to be able to present that information to them. So you might know that piece of information, let's say how to be a good leader. But if you don't help the students understand how to be a good leader, then it doesn't actually matter if you know it. So you need to figure out how to make it understandable for them. And then finally, you need to be able to identify and modify problems or areas of improvement. So you might be able to recognize, hey, they're doing this thing wrong. How can I help them get better at this thing? Creating actionable steps, and there'll be some methods for that later. So speaking of later, it is now later. So you can VOD review, which is basically going over film, no different than nutritional sports, where it's like, what did we do? What can we do better? You can sit in with your players and give them advice while they're actually playing. And again, if you're low on game knowledge, try to ask more questions rather than do X or Y. More often than not, if you ask questions, it'll at least force the players to think critically about what they're doing. And that would put maybe a second thought into it, which might change their behavior. Know that League is a very mental game. People are very toxic. It's pretty taxing in general. So you have to help them develop the mental fortitude and the skill sets to maybe not tilt, to not be toxic. And then finally, you can set up drills for things. Ideally, you can get them, let's say, 1v1 practice, maybe against players on the team or maybe against another high school team. You can try to get them to, let's say, practice CSing, killing minions before every day starts. You can try, let's say, getting them to hit certain skill shots on a target dummy and practice tool. There's a bunch of different drills you can set up to really get some buy-in from the players to be able to improve specific things rather than have them go play an entire full match. So some of the items you can point out as a coach are maybe what items did you build and why? Did you get caught out? Did you die at random times? Why did we take this fight? How come we used abilities in this way? Why did we forfeit this dragon? There's a ton of things, so don't feel like it's a specific item that needs to be pointed out every time. I just wanted to give a short list that you can start with if you've never coached a league before. But the most important thing on all this is creating actionable steps. So basically, we're working with students. We need to give them ways to improve. Just like in math class, we learn the lesson and then we go do practice. It's the same for League. You can do that with soft skills or in-game knowledge, depending on what you're most comfortable with. But you have to get them to be able to practice that skill, otherwise it won't develop in the long term. Remember that if the gameplay is wrong, be a little bit careful when stepping in if you're newer, because they might actually be right, or they might not take it from take the feedback from somebody that doesn't have as much experience as them. That's because there's generally a lack of respect in esports right now, which is rather unfortunate. And I'm hoping that with more time, as esports starts to get older and it gets more developed in the high school and pre-high school space, then I think that some of that respect will develop over time. So like I said, you can set a bunch of drills to really get that buy-in. One of the other exercises that I like to do with my teams is to have just a screenshot of a game up. I can show the dog later if you want. And then ask them, what would we do from this state? What is the win condition of team A? What is the win condition of team B? How can we approach this fight? How specifically are we going to use certain abilities? All that kind of stuff. And the interesting thing about this is, again, you can do this with very little game knowledge, because you can have the students do all the talking instead of you. If you are higher in game knowledge, then you can give a lot of points to talk about, well, I would do this, or this is why we should do item A instead of item B. But just know that that's not necessary, and you can still do this activity even as a new coach. Now, we're starting to approach some of the higher level stuff. And so this chart is probably one of the most important things in all of coaching. And it basically says all of the important information about the early game in League of Legends. Not all of it, but most of the important things. We can plan items around this. So for example, you might say, hey guys, at 3 minutes, we want to do item A. What are the steps at 1 minute and 30 seconds that we can do to plan out that item? You have specifics in terms of gold value. So maybe when you're going to recall, or on what wave you're going to move to a fight, or all that kind of stuff. And so this chart, really take a look at it. Go back to it later. I'm sure this will be uploaded, because you can learn so much just from this chart. Again, there are LCS coaches that are not doing this chart, which is crazy. So I'll leave it up here for a second. Again, my general approach to this is I'm kind of trying to tailor it to newer coaches as well. So understand, if you're a higher level coach, I'm trying not to go too far into depth, but I'll happily chat about it at some point if you'd like. So one of the systems that I like to use in coaching is expected value. If you've ever played poker or chess, it's pretty much the same thing, where let's say your team wants to do a play, and the value of the play is, let's say, a 4 at 70% chance success rate. That's a pretty good play, because you have a high odds of getting a high return. Now, the next question that makes this interesting is, what if the other 30% makes it a -6 play? Is it still worth taking? The answer is that it'll depend based on team compositions, how good you are compared to how good the enemy team is, and all that kind of stuff. But you can get some really interesting scenarios in this, where let's say there's a 60% chance for a +1, or a 40% chance for a -1. Would you take that? I think the answer is almost unequivocally yes. You just have to consider the opportunity cost of, maybe because you chose this play, you're sacrificing a play that could be like 50% chance for a 3, let's say 20% chance for a -2, and like 30% chance for a -6, or again, some random numbers. The way you start to come up with these is just by looking at the actual impact of what happens during the play. So, for example, we will lose this flash, we will gain this amount of gold, they will gain this amount of gold, they will earn this amount of time, all of that. And going back to the previous slide where everything is manipulatable, you can start to set up situations where you can guarantee early value in certain regards at a certain risk chance. So not only is League a game of, understanding what's going to happen and being able to actually execute, but also calculating risk and assessing and actually making a decision based on that. That gets into shot callers, and usually teams will have one shot caller that says, okay, this is the final decision. This is what we are going to do, and everybody commits to that. But people usually feed in information to that person so they can make a better, more informed decision. So really quickly, I'm going to walk through one of my favorite exercises. This has been a TJ special, and most people don't get this one, so this is very interesting. If we were to have an early game champion, that's not an on blue side, and then a late game champion on red side, there's actually a way, the sides don't matter, but just as the example, there's actually a way that this champion can always get out of lane if they have enough wave clear. And the simplest solution to that would be we let the enemy push for the first 3 waves. And now we are vulnerable for the next 3 waves. We take minion dematerializers, which is a rune. We demat the cannon. We clear the entire wave. The wave now crashes. We are now at 6 waves. And then the wave will come back like this after that. And our character will now be level 6. So that's a very oversimplified example of the real scenario that I'm talking about. But just understand that, again, everything is manipulatable, and we're able to set up these scenarios. This is why this chart back here is so, so, so important. Because imagine being able to just survive laning phase as a scaling champion. That's like, if you take a look here, 9 minutes is 5 minutes and 30 seconds in the game. That's already like 25% of the average game time. That's pretty crazy. Anywhere from like 15 to 25%, but still. So when you think about that, you're essentially minimizing your weaknesses and maximizing your strengths. Now, again, the enemy will have situations to do things, but teaching your players how to specifically approach things like this is really, really, really OP. So some random tips for kind of some of the new players again. This presentation will be posted so you can access the links. I posted some Scrim Discords in here. The second one is Diamond Plus, and scrims generally happen around 7 Central. You should learn the lingo as much as possible because you need to understand what they're actually saying. Skill Cap, Mobile X, and Pro Guides, they're pretty cheap in like all things considered, and you can augment some of your lack of game knowledge by using their systems where players can go watch videos and learn more about the game. And if you're a coach, something you might want to invest in as well. I'd really just recommend 1 per team, to be honest, and just kind of sharing the account because it's like $10 a month. But the amount of value lower level players especially can get out of it is really crazy. I would recommend kind of letting your players play what they want to play instead of like forcing team comps. Sean, I don't know specifically the price structure of all of them, but I'm pretty sure they're like $10 a month, all 3 of them, for like their paid service. I would recommend letting the players play what they want to play because they're going to have more fun. There's going to be more buy-in. They might be more comfortable. The only exception to that is kind of like a press R composition where you're like all 5 looking to fight together, lots of engage, because those are kind of like noob stomp, pub stomp comps. And then if you are not already on Twitter, Twitter is the space to get involved in League of Legends. You have to be on Twitter, pretty much no exception, because that's where all the coaches are, all the players are, and you can make a lot of good friends in there and learn a lot about the game. I learned so much just by browsing through Twitter, and it really strengthens some of my opinions or convinces me otherwise. So now I'll go into a specific concept, and for the low-level people, some of these might be a little abstract as to what's going on, kind of like the previous example. Just know that this is the kind of stuff that you're getting into, or rather you might be looking forward to, or you're looking to present information that you know in this manner. For the higher level people, it's not too high level, but it's up there. So I want to talk about when to ignore a side lane. And the purpose of this would be to shrink the mini map or the map of the game, and that would allow you to fight more often. So the first thing I want to talk about is like, why would we want to do this? What are we actually looking to learn? Because you want to give the students an idea of like what's actually happening, rather than like a random presentation with no buy-in at the start. And then use a lot of color, big text to really show the key points. So here I'm saying you can deny 400 gold and a full level in mid game. And to players, that means a lot because that's worth more than a kill. And a lot of people would say, oh, like one level GG can't win type thing, especially in laning phase. So calling back to the wave chart where I'm saying that everything is manipulatable, here's some of the math behind it and how, like where that's happening. Just some of the key notes. So I'm providing them that information up front in a way that's digestible. And then I explained what that information actually means. So a minute and a half is worth 400 gold, 900 XP, and then there's the level chart. So you can see that at level 9, that's about a full level. And level 9 is like early to mid game. I start going through some side lane stuff, again, prompting them with what's actually going to occur in the conversation. Sorry, cough drop got stuck. So the lanes are a place to earn gold and experience. That's the entire point of them. That's the premise of the game, because technically you could just ignore the lanes. You could all just go bot lane. In fact, there was a pro team that did that with just a bunch of pushing teams, or a bunch of pushing champions, Jarvan, Heimerdinger, Caitlyn, Blitzcrank, and someone else a long time ago. But it's very interesting because people hadn't really thought about the game in that way, where you could just not go to the other lanes. That was quickly patched out because Riot Games didn't like the unique approach to it. They prefer like the standard game, but I loved that actually happened. And then again, just kind of explaining that you're able to deny farm and you'll minimize your losses and maximize theirs. So again, notice pictures very clearly showing you the example, what is going to happen on the screen to help the players understand what's going on. So here, what I'm saying is that this Kled is making a mistake because he has pushed the minion wave in mid game, and this is going to go in this direction. The reason why this is a mistake is because down here, Dragon is spawning in 45 seconds, and he does not have teleport. So what he would have liked to have done is push this wave right here, and then the next wave that's coming up. But he can't because he needs to go to the dragon fight. Because dragons are generally viewed as important, and people will generally just fight over them, regardless if you can skip them. Then for any players that don't know, I give a small review on it, like, hey, this is what's going to happen in the lane. If you have 4 casters anywhere, they will push. So based on the previous screenshot, casters are a type of minion, by the way. Here we'll see that they have a cannon minion near full health and 3 full HP casters, so this will for sure push. Forgot I explained that there. And then here are 3 screenshots that show what happens for the next 90 seconds. And here we can see the calculation of this is how much they have missed. So again, I'm showing very clearly to the players what is actually happening, not, haha, this was a bad fight because that's really bad coaching. This is specifically, this is what is happening, and this is why it is bad, not just, haha, don't die here type stuff. So then I go into how can we actively set up this scenario. Again, I outline some of the conditions. They're not too important. It gets a little specific, but know that you need to outline the conditions. I provide as many examples as possible. I give a team composition where it's like, this is why we might do it on this team comp instead of on this comp. And the reasons why it is possible to do. Like, actually, these are the specific reasons why this can happen. Give reminders in terms of the information that's going on. And so the key thing out of all this is, again, not the specific information that I'm presenting here, but rather the way in which I'm giving that information. It's very formulaic. It's kind of, again, like a lesson in school where they have reasons to learn it. They have very clearly what is going on. And then I'll give them a scrim, or let's say 1v1, 2v2, set up a drill, whatever it may be, where they can go and actively practice this concept. It does take a little bit of convincing at first, but as soon as you kind of get the players to go through it, they learn that concept, they get better at that concept, and it's not about winning that scrim or losing that scrim. It's about getting better at this thing. And then you can apply this thing into those other games. So essentially you get like a bunch of scripts where you can say, okay, guys, I want to do this in the first 3 minutes. Let's go do it. And then it's not a question of, okay, well, how do I actually do this? What do I need to do with this minion, with that minion? What do I do with this wave? What wave is it? It's instead, oh, we've already practiced this. I know exactly what I'm going to do. And then we can simply do it. And then in the post game, we can say, did we do it well? Did we do it poorly? And it doesn't have to be me explaining the concept from bare start again. It's them reviewing the concept because they understood how to do it, and then saying, this is what we did wrong. This is why we did it wrong. The key thing there is the why. And that's because it'll change in every scenario, but you want to understand the base thought processes as to what caused it. Players will come up with a million excuses as to why something happened, but it's important to kind of dig down and say, like, okay, I get that, yes, but remember there's higher value elsewhere, or whatever it may be, to change that thought process instead of explaining the specific, like their specific example, because there's a bajillion potential reasons in League of Legends why you might do something, but it's about getting them onto the right side rather than the wrong side. So expanding on a little bit more, I again give them very specific things, what is going to happen on what wave, how we're going to set this up, give more key examples in terms of like, you're able to, let's say, do certain freezes, or am I doing this thing properly? Why am I doing this thing? To again create more buy-in for the student. Keep going through the example. It's the same thing over and over, but with very clear information. The player should not have a question as to what's actually going on, because like this should be outlined clear enough. And if it's not, then I didn't do a good enough job presenting it. It's not their fault. As the subject matter expert, it's your job to give them the information in a way that's presentable. My dog found my speaker and broke it. So one of the final things that I'll do in this presentation is that I'll give them a pro example of where this happens. And so we can quickly watch through it. And then I'll explain what's quickly explain what's going on. So we can assess, like, why is this fight a good or bad fight? Are both teams playing appropriately? Are they not? Where are the mistakes? And the real thing is that people would say, like, oh, or knew he wouldn't die, but really that's wrong, because red team did not rotate, red team missed abilities, and blue was overextended. So if we apply some of the thought processes of before, we can ask Ornn, let's say right here, we look, when we look at the mini map, we can see that there's a giant wave for red side down in the corner. It's kind of hard to see, but right. So someone's going to go answer that, because that's a lot of money, they'll say. We'll actually assess, do we need to go there or not? And we'll see right now Ornn is going to go answer it. He's recalled to go up there, and then that fight occurs, right? Am I missing it? Oh, that was actually the replay. So here, sorry about that. We can say Ornn, as a fighting, or like as a tank that wants to engage with his team in skirmish, he is going to collect the side minion wave. Does he need to be here right now? The answer is no, because we know that Set will push this minion wave forward. So he is currently and actively making a mistake. He could have been looking as a mid-fight instead. And then now he is overextending. We know this wave would go in this direction, so he doesn't need to be there. And then Set is saying, I'm going to fight, and for some reason, red team is not rotating down. Instead, they're just sitting around mid doing literally nothing. And then blue team rotates first, because red team is making the mistake. Ornn luckily lives because Set mispositions his W. And suddenly this is a good play for blue, right? The answer is no, because the start of it, Ornn is making the initial mistake. He was causing his team to be in a bad scenario, and you might say, oh, well, we're baiting it. That's not how that works, because if red would have rotated properly to the fight that red chose to take, then that means that red would have won the fight. And they had teleports. So blue team couldn't even trade for a Baron. But assessing that play is really hard. And it's very easy to miss something like that when if you're just kind of casually watching. And this is something that you might want to make a presentation on in the future. Like, hey, this is specifically why this is wrong. Very specific examples showing on what minion waves mistakes are happening, very specifically where the mistakes are, etc. And so what happened here in terms of why this is relevant to the ignoring in the side lane is that LeBlanc was here and they missed a bunch of gold. A very similar thing because she was able to push the wave out. It's a little bit different, but because she was able to push the wave out, red side ignored the side lane and then still lost out on it. Yeah, so Jonathan, the thing is that you have to assess who made the first mistake. So none of that should have even happened because if Ornn was playing properly, and that's not an unreasonable level of play to expect in terms of not contesting that minion wave, because when you think about why that minion wave matters, did he need that 100 gold? Based on items, no. He could have waited 20 seconds to get that gold. And if he would have just ignored it, then the wave would be pushing in this direction, and then red would have missed even more gold. So either way, blue side should never clear that minion wave. And so Ornn made the initial mistake, but then red made an even bigger mistake. And that's why that play ended up in that way, which is very interesting. So after showing a pro example, I would show kind of the pros and cons of like why you might do this. So the players know very clearly you are making a sacrifice or a trade every time you do something. Even if it's a small list of trade-offs, you are going to lose something. That's just how the game works. It could be time. It could be they can make a play sooner. Oh, lost me. It could be that maybe they get gold on a more valuable member than you do. There's a bunch of things that might be the trade-off, but there is a trade-off at all points. And then after that, I would say, hey, what actually is going to happen next, right? Like, how can you snowball this into a further advantage? And then that would turn into a future lesson with the players. So leaving the specific example, now here's some resources. Again, this will be posted, I'm sure. And here's some stuff for the newer guys in terms of like what to use. So there's stuff like Rift Kit, which was a way that I showed the example, like using the different waves. You can find literally anything on YouTube or Reddit. Again, if you're a silver level coach, you will be able to find information. It might not be the +6 information in terms of the EV, but instead it might be a +4. And if your players are currently doing a +2, you are objectively making your players better. Doesn't have to be the perfect amount of better. Like it doesn't have to be the best. It's just you are making them better than they were before. And at the end of the day, that's the job of the coach. And there's some specific things of my own, like the communication item where it says just some stuff that your teammates might talk about. But here's some stuff, and I'd recommend outlining this kind of stuff in the form of documents so that your players can look back at it without you having to repeat all this stuff 100 times. But when you use this kind of stuff, it really systematizes what's going on in your team. And then there's a list of streams to watch. Some of these guys are more toxic than others, but they are pretty good players overall. There's a link of stats websites so you can view what's going on in the game. There's the links to skill cap, mobile and pro guides, which again can help out. You can learn literally anything on the League of Legends wiki. I do stuff all the time with this. I'll go to a champion and like specific cooldowns. It's really important. Like knowing if your W is, let's say, 24 seconds rank 1. I didn't know there was 24. I knew it was like 26 to like 22, but I didn't know it was 24. And so you can start to plan very specific things around information like that. And then drafting tools over on the other side. So we're approaching the end of time. I tried to, like I said, give some very intro level information and then maybe some higher level information, but with the focus on how to present that information and how to actually teach somebody that using an example rather than like, this is a super important game concept, because realistically every team's going to need a different concept, and it would be too hard to say like, oh, this is like the most important concept. So hopefully that helped out a little bit, and I'll happily answer some questions now. Or if not, I'm sure I can ramble about something else. Give it a few minutes for questions. Is there any way we can get the presentation, use an example? Yep, I can give the when to ignore a side one. I'll just give this entire thing. I kind of transplanted one of my actual presentations into this, but yeah, I can provide both of them. The PowerPoint. I'll post it here right now, but pretty sure IHSEA said that there would be a master document and that everything was recorded. I don't know exactly how Hopin works, but I'm assuming it says that the session is being recorded, so I'm assuming that just goes into a VOD archive. Are there any activities you would recommend for students to help? Todd, can you explain that a little bit more? In what regard? So do you mean like, what are some example drills? Okay, so one that I literally used to do myself was, like I said, I would go into the practice tool and I would just record myself CSing minions every single day, because my CS per minute back when I was like a diamond player was like 7. And that's too low. And so I recognized, hey, that's not high enough. How can I get better at that? And I would just CS to 100 every single time. So specifically to 100 minions, and I would count how many I missed. And I would just do that like 3 times a day. And over the course of a month, I went from 7 CS a minute to like 9.8. That's a big difference, because again, if we go back to this, the wave chart down here, or where is it? Go back to this. This might be the difference on being able to plan a recall and get a certain item by to then be able to force a certain fight because I know that I'm stronger. Or maybe it means that I have enough for Lost Chapter at a certain time, which means I can get priority at certain times and then guarantee an objective, that kind of stuff. Other examples of drills are 1v1s. So you just go with someone else and practice specific things. Like, for example, if we fight to the death at level 1, who wins? Does it depend on if certain abilities are hit? Does it depend on how people walk? There's different things. Like, one of the drills that I did with my players was I literally had them play a game to 3 items, and then everybody got to 3 items and we just practiced team fights. So we would sit there and we would make sure everyone had all summoners available, or maybe certain summoners were down, and then we'd practice team fighting. And then it'd be, okay, well, this is what we did right in the team fight, this is what we did wrong. And then we'd sit it down, go collect more golds, and then talk about what we did correctly and incorrectly, and then go through it again and say, okay, let's do this team fight again. And then just running through it. Yeah, it takes up a bit of time, but instead of a scrim session for the day, you're doing, let's say, this plus another drill and 1 scrim game. When you think about the way traditional sports are done, when I was playing soccer, I would spend 80 to 90% of my practice doing drills, where it's, okay, I'm going to work on my foot control here, I'm going to work on catching here, then I'm going to do goal kicks, etc. And then only at the end, maybe, did we spend some time playing scrims, or once a week type thing. Not every day I'm just going to scrim and be incredibly inefficient with my time. So instead of focusing on a specific drill, I would say try to address the problem that you have, or like try to identify the problem. And then after that, come up with a solution within the current realm of League of Legends and address it. And it might not even be in League of Legends, which is the craziest thing. Sometimes I'll go into other games and play other games to actually learn concepts in League. So I was trying to learn more about vision and line of sight while I was playing a shooter game. And then I tried to apply that information into League of Legends. Like, how can I apply this same thing? And then because of that, I learned about some spots where you can hide on the map where enemies can't see you, but they would think they can see you, where you can place certain wards and all that kind of stuff. What's a good size champion pool? If you're playing at a diamond level, realistically, you should have 3 to 10, 10 stretching it, 3 to like 6 or 7. If you're playing below a diamond level, if every player has like 3 to 5, you're pretty solid. I would try to even limit it down to that regard, because people will say they can play more champions than they actually can, unless their fundamentals are just really good. So like if they can't understand a chart like this, they probably can't play 20 champions, just to be honest, type thing. But it like the concern is that you only have 3, and then you like one player gets banned out completely. So the ideal is that you have 4, and if all 3 of your characters are banned, then you'll just have to pick that character early. But the optimal is like 6, because then you'll never get fully banned out. You have a couple of options per, and again, especially at like a low level, the difference in the champions is so minute at gold. Like 2 champions that do different things to a gold player, they might basically do the same thing. So don't stress too hard on having too wide of a pool. Skills drills are super important. Esports practice is so inefficient, and as soon as people start to buy in more with drills and understand how to actually like improve themselves rather than just grind 25 games a day, like the growth will be exponential, because you could like repetitions and being in the scenario are what's important. And skills based practice, drill based practice is the way that you can get the most amount of exposure to those. So I was practicing, my bot laner had really bad wave control. And so I specifically set him up where once a week we would practice for an hour and just do 2v2s. And the only objective was, are you able to do this thing? Period. For the first 3 waves. Like that's all I'm asking you to do. For the first minute and a half, can you do this? The answer was no, he couldn't do it. And so we literally just repeated over and over and over and over until he could. And now he's able to do that. So that example where I was showing in the mid lane with the strong and early game champion, I do that with every single mid laner that I have, because people will say, oh, well, Zillion loses to LeBlanc, the scaling versus early game champion. Like, nope, it doesn't. You just have to understand why it generally loses and then minimize the counterparts. Yes, they will get an opportunity to do something, but if you play well, you can escape that lane every time. And then the kicker to that is everyone would love to have a Zillion that gets out of lane for free, but people just don't realize how to do it. But if you practice that drill and you learn those drills by specifically understanding stuff on this chart and everything else, then the players get a bunch of buy-in. They're like, oh my God, I can just get out of laning phase a Zillion as a late game champion? No way. Or let's say, your character likes to kill somebody instead. Wow, I'm playing Darius. I can just kill my top laner on wave 4 through 6 every single game by by denying first 3 minions, slow pushing wave, crashing or bouncing wave, calling jungler to support my 2v2. No way. Is there a list of resources that has, or a list for drills? No, there's not. There were some on this. Lost me again. There were some on this presentation. That's actually one of the things that I intend to put out onto my Twitter in the near future. So I'll go ahead and post that, because that's something that I'm working on getting out. Just know, oh, I just posted Twitter home. Just know that there might not be a drill that solves your specific problem, because you have to like create all of these, right? Like, so maybe instead of working about, or like instead of thinking about copy pasting a specific drill, again, identify the problem and then create your own drill with as much buy-in as possible. Like there was a League of Legends like Flash Simulator. Yeah, like a lull dodge game or something. And and you can just like sit here and practice flashing abilities. Now there'd be no way for you to know this one without actually knowing that. But I'm pretty sure I found this one on Reddit or something. And people will complain about like the feel of it, but instead, you can go practice with your friend and actually do this thing instead of flash using ability. I've never actually played this in new version, so I have no idea how it works. But you get the point where even a drill like that can be effective, depending on if it actually practices the item that you're trying to practice. Yeah, I can link it. Again, I have no idea what they've done, and if it's actually good. But the point is that it doesn't even need to be within League of Legends for them to learn a concept. I learned so much from just talking to people about League, or watching people play out certain scenarios. So don't like, as long as you create the reason for the student to want to learn, they will do the learning if you give them the tools to do so. Oh, is that it, Michael? I tried like every other button. I was trying my flash button. I was trying left click, but I guess I should have tried right click. And you can get really intense with it, right? Like you can have people, let's say you queue up 1v5 and there's a bunch of skill shots to dodge, and you throw an eye tracker on the student, and then you say, are you able to recognize that the skill shot is coming? Are you just randomly juking? Like, how are you doing this? So there's a lot of ways for improvement. You just, again, have to identify your problem and then create a situation that lets them practice that solution. So we did the same thing at Wesleyan, where we had a student who kept doing something wrong in the first 3 waves. And I'm like, I don't understand why this is happening. Can you explain it? Because he knows the information. And then we threw an eye tracker on him, and then we realized he's not even looking at the thing. And that's why it keeps happening. It's because he was not recognizing it. So by having that tool, the eye tracker, to be able to solve the problem, I was then able to say, okay, great. Now we're going to sit there and look at this thing. You don't need to look at anything else. Just sit there and look at this specific minion. And then we didn't have a problem with it again because I was able to identify the problem and then create a solution. If you guys have more questions, I'll happily sit around to answer, but know that there are other presentations going on as well. Because we're at the next cycle. And Gamer Doc's closing remarks are at 3:15. Coaching league make you a nerd? If you let it, right? Like, you can frame it in whatever way you want. So you can say that you're coaching them on life skills instead, and it has nothing to do with League of Legends, and you're still improving them. That's what most amateur coaches are anyway. It's not actually about their specific game knowledge. They just help them communicate and that kind of stuff. And that's, again, where you have to just recognize what you're actually going to be coaching and then specialize, for lack of a better word. Like, really make sure you're teaching them something instead of nothing. Here, I'll grab the dog. All right, so there he is. There's the guy that was barking. And here's my Google Home that he destroyed during the presentation. I don't even know where he found it. And there's the other puppy. I'll head to the other one as well at 3:10. So I will stick around until then. You're welcome, Joe. Like I said, I know it was a little watered down and a little high level at certain points. So if you have specific questions, feel free to answer or message me, and I will respond. It's just kind of hard to make a presentation for two completely different audiences. Um, the biggest takeaway is just making sure that you're improving the players in some capacity, though. All right, I'm going to head over to the other presentation. Thanks for coming if you're still here, and enjoy the rest of the conference.